Carl, this is a treat having you in conversation on a screen as opposed to our usual coffee spot. How are you doing today?
Yes, always lovely to see you, and I'm doing really well apart from the heat.
Yes. So, for
Yes.
context for everyone listening slash watching, Carl and I have known each other for many years. We both live in Barcelona, where it is sweaty at the moment and very, very uncomfortably hot. And we're only recording this in June, so
It's only June.
brace ourselves. So, there's a bit of a top and tail to this conversation, or top certainly. Carl and I meet, well, you and I meet most weeks, and we chat about art, and we chat about AI, and we chat about existential threats. Just the run of the mill things. And so I've been wanting for a long time to invite you to chat about your ideas on the show, especially as it relates to creativity and AI, because you have a background as a software developer and as a painter, a realist painter with extraordinary technical and aesthetic ability and beauty in that world. So you are the
Thank you.
perfect person. And we have quite different opinions in some ways about art and
Yeah.
creativity. This is going to be juicy. So before we get to any of that stuff, what do you sense or imagine is happening in the global human psyche right now?
I think that I can only speak for myself, but everything is moving really, really fast. There's too much information. There's too much new stuff happening all the time. It's really difficult. It's getting harder and harder to keep up. And then I feel low-level anxiety about what's going on in the world at the moment. I think we've already entered the George Orwell's doublethink world, where completely opposite things are true at the same time. This separation, the polarization that's going on. I think everyone is really anxious at the moment
Yeah.
and just trying to keep their heads down and survive. That's how I feel.
Yeah. And it's curious to think sometimes that feeling can be felt in places where we don't actually experience an immediate risk to our lives, that there is this pervasive sense, even in quote unquote protected or privileged areas, of there being this big turbulent, it's almost like a turbulent wave running through the world at the moment.
And I think from everything that I understand after the Second World War, the kind of a world order was set up based on international law and human rights. And it just feels like it's being emptied out, hollowed out. It's quite frightening.
It's curious. I was talking yesterday it was actually for a radio show for Do Radio on creativity. I was interviewing Michael Mead, who's an American mythologist, and he was talking about apocalypsis as collapse renewal, as this quality of time that we're experiencing where the collapse is happening at the same time as renewal is happening, and it can feel like we're falling into this abyss, and how important it is at moments like this where there's so much uncertainty and unknown and such a feeling of rapid change, as you mentioned, that at times like this it's particularly important that we orient towards creative practices. And I found that really, really fascinating. So I'd like to start by asking, what actually does creativity mean to you? And then I'll move to the AI question.
Sure. Do you mean what would I define creativity as, or what does it mean to me in my personal life?
I think in your personal life.
Okay. It's a place where I'm in flow, and so I lose track of time, and I'm just enjoying being in the moment there. So I guess it's probably some kind of a meditation, probably. Yes, and I think in general, especially with realist art, it forces you to look quite a lot at stuff
Yeah.
for a long time.
Yes.
And that's a process that I really enjoy as well, because of not just my background as a software engineer, but I guess in that way I'm a little bit nerdy. But I like to know how things work.
Yeah.
So with the art stuff, I really got into light and form and really got into light and how light works. And the more I look at stuff and try and explain why colors are changing, the more I have to learn about light and the more it becomes mysterious and exciting.
We're so opposite in that sense. Like, I relish the extraordinary capacity you have, the patience and perseverance to analyze exactly what's going on. And for me, it's the opposite. I mean, I'm very good at analyzing what feels right and what doesn't, but it's a much more somatic sensation of snagging attention on something that hasn't quite resolved itself, as opposed to the armature beneath, whether it's understanding how light moves over a body or whether it's the muscles. But so then thinking about this flow state and creativity and your work as a realist artist and a teacher, how does AI show up in your work?
Well, first, something interesting because I've played a lot with AI and I've noticed that I enter the same flow state.
Oh, yeah, say more.
But I'm using different tools. That's all. And I think when the AI stuff started coming out, the generative image AI, I went through a little crisis. I think we had a conversation around that time.
I think we had a couple.
Not knowing what to make of it, just being caught up in the my job is gone. Interestingly enough, now with all of the advances with code generation with AI, my previous job is also gone. So
Two for the price of one.
yeah, exactly. But I think I've got a more sophisticated internal understanding of it. It's a tool. So I could use AI to make an edit to a photo, take something out of the background. That's pretty safe, right? I think most people would agree. Yeah, all artists can use that. That's useful.
Yeah.
Or I could go one level up and say, okay, no, I'm going to actually generate the entire photo with AI. But then it's not a person. But how do you know it's not a person? Let's move a level up where you start saying to the AI, no, create me a person in the style of Picasso. Okay? So then we start talking about copyright issues. Is it your style? Did you invent that style? Or you could go one step up and say to the AI, create me an image of two people standing that mixes the style of Picasso with the style of Bouguereau. And then we start talking about, okay, so where do original ideas come from? Are they just something that pop out of the ether, or are they a combination of things that you've seen? Are they the result of all the experiences that you've had in your life, all of the images that you've seen, knocking around in your subconscious, and suddenly something pops out? And I find it quite interesting how that's very similar to an AI model that's been trained on lots of different images. And depending on the input, it combines things sometimes in novel ways. And is that creativity? I don't know. But I do see quite a lot of parallels between the way that human brains work, the way that AI models work. And after listening to a conversation that you had with Aaron, I think it was last week or a couple of weeks ago, and he kind of said that he thinks that we're biological. What did he call it?
Biological algorithms. I was just thinking of that.
Biological algorithms. I mean, there's a case to be made for that.
No. Yeah.
And what I've noticed for sure in the artistic community, and that I saw in myself as well, was an immediate knee-jerk reaction of, this is bad, this is horrible, we need to get rid of this. But if we disconnect that a little bit from the societal impact that it will have, or the job losses that it will incur, if we take, and the environmental impact, if we take all of that away and we just look at this tool or this technology, it's just amazing. It is amazing that you can write in some text and it comes up with a photo. It's just mind-blowing and
Yeah.
wonderful and exciting. Then, of course, there's all the other stuff that's awful. But I don't necessarily think that that other stuff is it more that it's what am I going to say? It's what society makes with that tool or does with that tool, or the context within that tool exists that really defines what it is, like gunpowder, for example. On the one end, you've got guns killing people. On the other end, look at all the things that it made possible with mining, with like lots of things that it made possible that wasn't possible before, or really difficult to do before.
So there's something, as you were describing or thinking back to the conversation with Erin and the biological algorithms, and then describing about ways in which the ways that we draw upon previous experience, stimulus, etc., to generate quote unquote new interpretations or variations of that which we've come into contact with. One of the things that came to my mind was how, and I was thinking about this from a perspective of frustration, because I've just been working on a painting where I've been trying to fix some structural issues. And how actually one of the beauties and frustrations of being a human is that you are at the mercy of your one's own concentration that day, how much alertness one has.
Mood
is huge, whether you're hungry or not, how much you've slept. Also, sometimes things like the paints that you're using, or if you've just done something, like if sometimes you start on the wrong foot somehow with mixing the wrong color and it's slightly off, and then it just ends up in this weird knock-on cycle where everything just goes to shit and you have to erase the whole day's work. Like, there are weird anomalies that are results of an embodied experience, and the kind of the process you have to go through to create something beautiful relies on so many different factors that are physical factors, like the tools you're using, your mood, environment, etc. And when I'm thinking about the kind of biological algorithm idea, which implies a biology, the algorithms we're talking about, so LLMs, the creativity or the number of elements that go into the creative output seem much less complex. Like there's a reduction in complexity in terms of all the stuff that it has to go through. Like, it doesn't have to think about paint or medium or light conditions. It just creates something based on statistical models and probabilities and where should I put the next pixel, and then the capacity of the artist, you, to give really thoughtful, skillful prompts with the right kind of images as training data to be able to get the best out of the algorithm. So it does feel to me like a different order of thing, a different order of creativity somehow. I don't know if that's, I don't wonder what your reflections are on that.
I don't think that mixing the right color is creativity. It's a skill. That if you know how the color wheel works and you know how your pigments work, you're going to be able to mix exactly the right color if you get really good at it at exactly the right value, a little bit more tricky, and then apply it. So for me, there's a lot of skill involved in realistic painting, and I don't think necessarily any of it has to be creative. It's motor skills. So learning new skills to write the correct prompt, it's just another skill.
Yeah.
However, while you are working with the AI and saying, maybe I should prompt this and this, and you start combining different ways of prompting, or you start to get to know the models and think of interesting ways to mix them, or there's still a lot of creativity going on there.
And I think there's also something else, which is people have talked about quite a lot, the importance of having the experience to be able to understand the context, to be able to kind of evaluate the output of a piece of, I don't know, AI-generated content. So, for instance, the fact that you've had realist training over the course of years gives you the capacity, expertise, acquired skill, knowledge, and practice to be able to critique authoritatively what's coming out and to be able to get the best out of the model. So I think that's one element, is that if you have that existing human skill and capacity, you're in a much better position at this stage, at least, to get out of the model the output that you want. There was another point I was going to make, and I've now forgotten where I was going.
I had another thought while you were saying that as well, and I've forgotten. I've lost that one as well.
It's the Barcelona
age.
heat. Oh no, I remember what it was. It was about interiority. So I was listening yesterday to, I mean, it was quite interesting. A conversation between Geoffrey Hinton and Steve, what's his chops, Diary of a CEO. Is it Steve? I think Steve. Anyway, I don't often listen to his show, but I was very curious about Geoffrey Hinton and what he had to say about AI. And one of his positions that I found intriguing and also quite frightening is that AI, for all intents and purposes, LLMs think. And I was reflecting on this, and I was reflecting on agency and the agentic economy, and how when it comes to creativity, yes, of course, we take in different stimuli and the rest of it, but there seems to me to be something about images that come to us or something that captures our imagination that then creates almost like a spark of desire to create something that represents that idea or that sensation. So like inspiration has to come from somewhere. And I don't think it is a result of us just taking in loads of stimuli and then reconfiguring it and putting something out. I don't think it's quite as mechanical as that. I think there is something else going on, which I know is kind of more of a cosmological position. What's your thought on that in terms of how humans create based on an internal subjective impulse, and how that might be similar or different to the prompts that we have to give an AI system to generate? So it's an external instruction that it's responding to in order to create something.
I guess it's again where you position AI in your tool set. Because you may have an idea, you have a dream at night, or a subconscious idea comes to you of, there's this image of an apple on a piece of tarmac that just has this deep resonance with me.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but somehow, or some other idea that other people also say, oh, that's a really nice idea. Mm-hmm. I don't think AI is going to come up with that idea. You're still going to come up with idea, but you need tools to help you realize that idea. And something I think that's also missing is the difference between an image on a screen generated by AI and a painting made with oil hanging on a wall. At least for now, we're still in a space where the physicality, the physical object, is not something that is being produced. Can it be produced? I seem to remember seeing a video of a Rembrandt painting being made by printing pigments layer by layer onto a canvas. So possibly in the future, even that physical manifestation of an image might be taken over by the robots. But we're not there yet.
Got another 3 weeks before that happens.
Yeah. So I would also say that there's a difference between, let's say you come up with an image that's been haunting you and it's been bubbling up from your subconscious, and you have this drive to create this image. You put it on a piece of canvas. It takes you however many weeks or days, and you exhibit it. And some people will look at it and say, don't like it much. And some people will say, oh my God, this makes me think of my Nana when she was this wonderful moment that we had together. And it's in the eye of the beholder. So I would love to do a test where you put in an art museum pieces created by humans. Well, they've done tests like this, but it was all screen-based. But does it matter who created it? But there's another thing there, because let's say the AI generates you a photo reference and you start painting from the photo reference. You could just copy the photo reference really well, And some people like that style. Or you could idealize it and change things as you go, or you could simplify it. There's so many things that you could do with that photo image. And I don't think, if we talk about photo references, I mean, generally it is accepted that people can work from photo references because everybody doesn't have the money to afford having a live model sit there for weeks and weeks on end. So, yes, exactly where does the AI sit in that process?
So, one of the things that you've touched on before in our conversations is this idea of cultural gatekeeping, which I think touches on what you've just been pointing towards. So, the idea about, when you go to see a piece of art and one person loves it and the other person hates it, what is art and who gets to decide what's good art? This is such a loaded question.
No, I agree. I think it's a really important question because, as I said before, when we were talking about AI as being just a tool and how it's being used, here I want to talk about actually something. The reaction against AI, I think the main problems that we're having with it is the enormous amount of energy that it's using, about the carbon emissions coming from it. And suddenly everyone is worried about AI. But at the same time, the fashion industry is a lot more polluting, takes up a lot more energy, pollutes a lot more water. And I think both of these things are pointing to a systemic problem in the society that we live in, of consumerism and capitalism. Now, I don't have a nuanced stand on this. I could argue one way, I could argue the other way for socialism versus capitalism. They have their benefits, they have their drawbacks. But I don't think that taking AI out of the system is the solution. We need to change how we interact with it. So getting back to the point of, or your original question of gatekeeping, so that's the world that we live in. It's a world in which you have many brilliant, really, really technically skilled artists not being able to afford rent or food. And you have people pasting bananas on walls. And I'm not necessarily saying putting a banana on a wall is a bad thing or is not art or is art, but who gets to decide whether it's art or not? And that's something that I have a problem with. And actually, a really good example of this is, I don't know if you know about, what was it called? Operation Long Leash.
No, what's that?
That was an operation run by the CIA to promote Jackson Pollock and his art, because during the Cold War, America wanted to put forward this idea of the free world having advancing their ideas, being liberal in the arts, and being so much more free than, for example, Russia. So Jackson Pollock became this massive artist because of the CIA operation. There were a few other artists in there as well. So again, Jackson Pollock is in all of the art history books as one of the great masters of modern art. But was he? So in a big way, art is also fashioned. And who gets to decide what is fashionable?
So there's something in that. So there's the kind of the level of trend. I mean, there's many things to that. So level of trend, what's fashionable politically, financially. So there's kind of tendency for people to just, if they get huge amounts of wealth, to purchase art and artifacts that will appreciate and value, and then just store them in, in these international ports and what have you. So there's that kind of, there's all sorts of different ways in which you can experience or think of quote unquote art. But there is something about being touched by an image that is so captivating, it has like an oracular quality to it, or there's some sort of emotional kind of, I don't know, like cadence that it has that can stop us in our tracks. And I think, for each of us, it might be different images, but there are a few that I really, really love. So, for instance, in the National Gallery in London, one of the images that I love the most, well, actually, there's quite a few of them, but there's the one of Lady Macbeth. She's got this kind of haunting look in her eyes, and she's holding, I think it's a crown above her head, or Ophelia, or the Death. I think it was a Saint Eulalia, this naked this young woman who's on this stone ground, and the snow is falling, and doves have. I just like these sorts of very romantic images that just I can stand in front of them for hours, and there's something that really touches me about them. And the pre-Raphaelites have fallen in and out of favor. Some people hate them, some people love them, and it's really subjective. But there's something in it that I cannot deny touches me. Even if I didn't want it to touch me, it touches me. And so there is something about art being able to do that, to kind of reach into us and touch some deeper part that feels something that's bigger than, I don't know, that it's hard to even put words to. And yet I know that that's probably also possible with skillful prompting of AI to create these images. And one of the images that you showed me, actually, when you were working, or was it with Midjourney, or was it another one? The guy with the red beard that was pre-Raphaelite looking, was just a stunning image.
Yeah.
There are examples that you have made that have also captured my imagination in a very similar way. That if you did an image, if you reproduced it in Paint from that reference image that had been generated with AI tools, I wouldn't be able to tell that it had been developed using AI tools.
That was the crisis that I went through. That's a couple of years ago, because here I was generating in, well, I wouldn't say in seconds, because, well, I'll get back to this in a minute, but there I was creating things that I just thought were beautiful, that I would love to have on the wall, that I felt an impulse to put on my wall. And it wasn't generated by a human.
Yeah.
However, I was prompting, it was generating lots and lots and lots of images. So I was controlling that process. And one out of all of those images was the one where I thought, oh, hang on, this is amazing. And then taking that image and developing it further, changing things. So a human was still driving that process.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, when I'm thinking about AI can now you can send it a picture of your living room, and it can come up with a really, really nice design for a suggestion for how you redecorate this interior. And
that's what I need right now.
Links. Yes. So does that mean that all interior designers are going to lose their jobs? No, because we as artists or creatives are still the people that look at something and think, oh, there's something unusual or special or different about this image, or about this sofa, or this color combination. And some people don't have that capacity to make those kinds of decisions or to think their way through that. So they become the clients of outsourcing their creative decision making or their taste.
But taste is a
skilled operators.
Yes. But those skilled operators can either be human individuals or LLMs or very specific applications that can. So I'm curious then, what do you think? Let's zoom down the timeline to, let's say, 3 years from now. What do you think our relationship to things like music or art will be, or TV, for instance? Because I know that there's a huge amount of development happening in terms of being able to, especially in China, I've seen some phenomenal applications, creating videos out of 3D still photography. What do you think our relationship to arts will be in a few years' time when it's, I'm presuming, easier for people to just replicate on the fly or bring something to life using an AI application?
Okay, so first I want to make it clear that I'm not pro AI.
Okay.
I'm also not against it. I
Right.
marvel at it. I'm for it because it makes things a lot easier. I'm against it because of all the jobs it's going to take away.
Yeah.
And that terrifies me because illustrators, graphic design, it's amazing how it started with the arts instead
Yeah.
of some of
Almost
the
always
other
does.
occupations. But now programming and so many other things. And I think in 3 years' time, it's only going to get better. It's not going to go away, it's going to get better. And we have to come up with a way to deal with that as a society.
Yeah.
Worldwide, we have to come up with a way to deal with that because the old systems can't work. And I think that feeds back into this anxiety that I think people are feeling because we can see this train is coming and no one is coming up with solutions for
Yeah.
how to deal with it. We don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. There was this really chilling, I can't remember where I was seeing it. Well, I was listening to it while painting yesterday. It was an example of someone, an American politician, really high up, talking about AI, but not calling it AI. It was in terms of education, rolling out AI in the education system. And she was talking about it. She called it A1. Like there was just such a basic misunderstanding. And I was thinking, fuck me, if people, and luckily we're not in the States, but whatever happens in the States has a knock-on effect in the rest of the world. But I was thinking, if people in positions of leadership and power don't understand even the most basic of ideas surrounding AI, what it is, how it's impacting jobs, how it's impacting, the ways that we learn or cheat at exams or use it for hope or like whatever it is, then we're going to be in some pretty hot water.
The problem with that is it then the responsibility of every single person on the planet Earth to read up on AI and listen to all of the podcasts and read all the news articles? No. Or is it? I don't know.
So that's an interesting. So the one about responsibility, because I think it's clear that enough people need to be able to understand about how it's potentially going to impact our lives to be able to lobby governments to act on our behalves. Because I think there's a huge amount of pressure that isn't yet being felt at the governmental level that would change laws if there was a need by the public. So I'm thinking also, for instance, and it's an easy connection to make, but a lot of the laws now that are starting to be passed around social media use and school use phone use in schools and things like this, where enough parents have seen devastating consequences of general phone use and social media use in their children on sleep, on bullying, on self-harm, that finally now, 10 years down the line, slightly more than 10 years, governments are having to make some interesting decisions about how to legislate for it. But with AI, it's not it's so much more complex than social
It
media.
is.
And it's not just kids, and there's so many different angles, and there's hype, but then there's also areas in which it's really completely transforming entire industries. Like think about its use in medical contexts or in military contexts. So it's such a different beast in terms of magnitude. Whose
Yes, I agree.
responsibility is it? To engage with the whole idea
We're
of how we
dealing
might use it.
with polar opposites at the moment where people are asking, is AI making us dumb?
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, AI is transforming education in self-paced, interactive, immersive learning. So the kinds of ways that you can educate people to learn new things is just amazing with AI. So you've got these two opposites. So we have to basically rely on our governments to govern this. And I think the other anxiety that everyone has is, can we trust our governments? Because
Yeah.
to me, looking at the world today, I don't think that we necessarily can.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned at the top of the conversation the disintegration of many of the institutions that were established after the last huge disruption, so Second World War, in order to create some form of stability, and how actually we're at a point where so many of those institutions are coming under great pressure. They're unable to deal with a lot of the complexity of the issues that people face. And this is exactly the time when we need stronger, wiser, more compassionate, skillful, intelligent leadership. Like, yeah. And yet it seems to be going in the opposite direction. You have, in these sorts of contexts, it's like almost the dissolution of boundaries between corporations, governments, and
Mm.
our cognitive sovereignty. Like, there's just so much shit going on.
I know.
That is, it's kind
I'm
of everything is
really
up for grabs. It feels like, yeah. So thinking about things like one of the other questions I wanted to ask you, thinking about things like copyright and IP, intellectual property. One of the things I was thinking on this morning, I was listening to an episode of Your Undivided Attention with Tristan Harris and Asa Raskin and these folks, and they were talking with a guest who was suggesting that we might be on the cusp of a change so vast that there are certain things that we fundamentally have to reconsider and relinquish. So the idea of copyright, the idea of IP, but for that to work in a way that supports all, especially when so much of the training data was taken without consent, and undermines the economic capacities of people to make a living for themselves whose information was stolen. I mean, that just seems particularly cruel. There is a question there about what might a future look like in which all of the output that we create, whether it's beautiful poetry or, I don't know, a documentary or, I don't know, maths formula, that everything becomes the property of privately owned LLMs that are then selling services back to individuals that need those services to skill up to be able to create output in a shorter time span. Like, it just feels like a really cannibalistic system, on the one hand. But on the other hand, do you think it is fair to imagine that we need to have a complete rethink about many of the assumptions that we've held in our society about privacy, copyright, IP, and who
Yes,
gets to have that?
it's hairy. It's very
It's,
difficult
yeah,
because on the one hand, I think, okay, so let's say I love Rembrandt
yeah,
and I spend years studying Rembrandt and learning to paint exactly like Rembrandt. Um, and I can make paintings that look like Rembrandt. Now, AI has just taken that from a 30-year, 40-year time span into a minute.
yeah,
But if you start thinking, who does the IP belong to, the intellectual property, it gets a little bit more difficult. So again, if you think about, let's say you are exposed to 19th century art for your whole life and you start learning how to paint like 19th century artists, of course you're going to have your own spin on it, but intellectual property there again. So if we bring it forward to large language models being trained on our collective output as a human race, because that's what they're trained on. I agree with you 100% that a private company should not be allowed to tax us or to charge us to pay for the things that we created.
that it stole.
That
Because if
it
it's out of
stole,
copyright, if it's out of copyright, then anyone can. But if it's if it's a living person and it's their life's work and it's what they get paid to do,
I agree. If it's, but even a living artist will have had their sources from other experiences from other artists. We're combining things together, which is what the LLMs do. So I agree, as a society, we need to worry about an AI that can create a Carl Jager painting. Well, it can create an image of a Carl Jager painting. It can't make the physical object. But just going back to the image rights, okay, so let's say you have someone who loves Disney, and I'm bringing up Disney specifically because at the moment there's this legal case against Midjourney by Disney about their intellectual property. Let's say I am someone who loves Disney and I learn to draw Disney princesses really well. That's fine, right? I can draw Disney princesses. There's no problem with it. I can maybe start making Disney princess gift cards drawn by hand and give them to my family, and that's still fine.
Yeah.
Maybe at some point I start selling them for a small fee because I need to make an income.
Yeah.
And it starts becoming a little bit problematic, but Disney's not going to sue me for that. But at some point, if I start using Disney's IP to make money, they're going to get angry and it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
So I think we're at that moment with AI where we kind of have to figure out where's the line of what kind of commercial use is allowed or not allowed. But in general, I do think that AI models trained on our collective output as a human race people should not need to pay for access to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it belongs to all of us. Where I think companies can justify charging us for these is when it comes to the really small cost incurred with inference. But I think the tech industry can still make a lot of money by tooling it really well, by creating a website or an app that makes the experience of using it, adding tools that are really, really useful to be able to get access to this. This is where I think I can see the value of tech companies. But no, I agree with you. I don't think that they can charge us for stolen content.
Yeah. So thinking about tools, because I do think you used the word to marvel at this earlier, which I thought was particularly interesting, because there is a magic to being able to just type in a command, a prompt, and generate something phenomenal or have something appear in front of our eyes. And so I do want to spend a little time asking you, what are some of the most exciting tools and applications as an artist, also with your kind of software engineer's hat on, that you are seeing at the moment that you're most, enamored by or excited at the prospect of?
Lately, I think the image generation models, they kind of started reaching maturity maybe about a year ago. Every time a new image model comes out, they're not performing that much better. It's not these huge leaps that we experienced before. So in terms of creating photos, for example, that you can't distinguish whether it's been made by AI or not, we've been there for a while.
Yeah.
But some of the exciting advances, I think, ChatGPT came out with it a few months ago, where you can just tell it, generate me an image, or well, you give it a photo of your backyard. You say, can you come up with an image where someone's redesigned my backyard, and it spits out an image where it's redesigned. And you say, by voice or by text, I don't like the red umbrella, make it yellow. For the AI to have that kind of contextual understanding of what's going on in the image and being able to change things, I think that's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
But I think most of the work now is going more into video, audio generation, not so much image based. So for artists, I think we've probably reached peak tool.
Certainly plateau tool.
Yeah, where I can't really see how it can get much better apart from being faster or having higher resolution or maybe having better tooling around it.
Yeah.
I would actually like to just clarify when we were talking about intellectual property, copyright. Um, of course, I see that there's a really big problem with using AI to imitate or copy the style of someone and financially putting them at a disadvantage of cloning someone's voice and using it, uh, the big Scarlett Johansson gate.
Yeah. Yeah.
But even there, what I love about the AI debate is just all of the nuances and the tricky questions it brings up. Because I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about, okay, so you've got Morgan Freeman's voice. You can't copy Morgan Freeman's voice. But there are lots of Morgan Freeman impersonators and you could copy their voice. Is it
Oh,
then
yeah.
Morgan Freeman's voice? Or you have a voice that sounds very similar to, like, does Morgan Freeman's voice belong to Morgan Freedom?
Oh, no.
Freedom? Of course it does. But I mean, Morgan Freeman, it's not just his voice. It's the way that he talks, the cadence, the kind of things that he uses. There's more to it than just a voice.
Yeah.
For me, in the music industry, I guess because I'm used to the tooling around AI for images, but my partner has been playing around a little bit with what's it called? The AI tool for making music.
Suno.
Suno, that's it.
That's what I was thinking of.
And it's come up with some bangers, things that I was really surprised that I wouldn't have thought that AI would have been able to create something like that. And I'm talking about more alternative styles because, like, let's be honest, a lot of the pop that we hear on the radio
Yeah.
is formulaic. And
Yeah.
whether a human comes up with it or AI comes up with it, if we think back to Stockacre Waterman, who produced Kylie Minogue in the 80s, and Jason Donovan, there were a few artists that they managed, and these artists didn't write their songs. Well,
Yeah.
I hope I'm not offending Kylie, but someone else writes the song,
Yeah.
you sing it, they tell you what to wear, they create the look, you
Yeah.
become a product. And it feels quite similar to me for AI to be doing that.
Yeah.
But if you create an AI song and the moment you hear it, it just puts a big smile on your face and you play it to your friends and they love it, what's happening there?
Yeah.
The problem
Yeah.
is that many of the music artists would be put out of their jobs.
And again, I think
And
there's something. Sorry, go on. Yeah.
and this is the problem that we need to address.
Yeah.
Is that this technology is not going to go away, but we need a fundamental restructuring of our systems to be able to deal with it.
Yeah.
And I think this is the part that's going to be really difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. I was reading up on, Studio Ghibli, and there was the ways in which people were using, I think it was principally ChatGPT, to recreate scenes, but in a Studio Ghibli style.
Yeah.
And there was something that was really curious that came up, which was that, of course, there's a huge difference between replication and origination, and the sense that someone like, let's say in the art world, just to keep it in there, like Van Gogh, his style was within a context of a movement where looser brushstrokes were permitted, but it was so distinctively his. It wasn't pointillism. It was connected to his own. Some people think he had a particular kind of visual condition that led to the specific ways in which he would apply the paint. But it's so distinctively him, and it didn't exist before, and it hasn't really existed since, except through direct reference or replication. And the same sorts of things with Studio Ghibli, which, yes, there's the whole context of, in a very broad, generalized brush, like the manga, but it's a very particular expression through someone's imagination that can then be replicated. That there's something really interesting about that, about the difference between replication when there's a boy band who strikes on something and there's a formula that can then be, put through Suno and off you go and you just create the same thing, versus someone that comes up with something that is sufficiently original that it creates a marking point. And yes, it's novel. And so I think there is something about, and I think that actually proves the point of that there isn't such a thing as constant repurposing and novel combinations, that sometimes things break the mold. And when that happens, there is something that is hard to point towards, like a kind of, it's like the secret sauce or whatever. And I don't imagine that this is necessarily unique to humans, but I think, I don't know what and I'm sort of also conscious of the fact that I'm tending towards human exceptionalism, the idea that, these are traits and properties of a human life or human imagination, which when you get enough of a society together, enough people, you'll get these sparks of novelty. And it may be that machines will be able to do this as well at some point if they have enough advanced, I don't want to use the word evolution, but if they evolve sufficiently or if they get developed sufficiently. But at the moment, they're not at that stage. So when we use technologies to replicate, it's a replication and a rehashing. I don't see novelty happening just yet. I'm prepared to be proven wrong, but yeah.
Back to my crisis of 2 years ago, where by mistakes and hallucinations that the AI made, and by prompting for different things to be combined, images started coming out that were unlike anything that I've seen anywhere, and that I found really beautiful. So I think I'm going to disagree with you there.
Oh.
But I also want to say that, let's say you come up with, I think every artist is going to have to decide for themselves at which level they want to use AI.
Yeah.
Maybe you could say, I'm not going to use it, and total respect for that. Or you could say, I'm going to use it just to touch up my photographs.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Or I'm going to generate photos because it's too hard to learn how to get lighting set up in the correct way and get the model to be the right way. Because that also, for photographers, so many of the arts. Anyway, so I can't afford a photographer and I can't figure out how to learn this stuff myself. So maybe that's the level at which you come in.
Yeah.
Or you decide, I'm going to combine styles and tell it what to make, and it comes up with an image. And it might look completely new, or it might look like a combination of things. Or you might just say, I like Matisse, make me a picture like Matisse, and it makes you a picture like Matisse, and you copy that Matisse onto a canvas, and you say, but there it is, I've just made this. So I don't think I could do the latter, because what's in it for me while I'm doing this, all I'm doing is just copying something. There's nothing exciting or enriching in that process.
Well, then you're a human scanner, basically.
Yes. And being a human scanner is also fine.
Yeah.
But let's say it creates quite a detailed image, and I'm not skilled at copying that image, and I make mistakes. And suddenly that is the thing that is, oh wow, look at that, that's amazing. It's so primitive. Like it's all about how you sell it. I'm sorry, I'm being incredibly pessimistic about it.
Yeah.
But I think for me, where I kind of felt my balance is to just do whatever feels good and makes me happy while I'm doing it. And I think just having the AI create something and me copying it, what's the point of that?
Yeah.
So it's when you come face to face with your limitations of handling the media or etc., where maybe you find it interesting or maybe you find it exhausting, or you cut corners and you come up with a new idea and you kind of go down that route. Yeah, I think everyone has to decide for themselves
where that is.
Mm.
So we're coming to the end of this conversation, but I want to ask you a couple of questions before we finish. And one of them, and I know that this is something that comes up quite a bit for us, is given the pace of change and the amount that you are leaning into these questions, sometimes it can be quite overwhelming. And I'm curious, how do you orient yourself towards creativity in life when it's just really full on and a bit much?
I think maybe one of the ways that I see our relationship with art changing is by artists not necessarily creating works of art so that they can sell it and survive and make a living, but people doing art because it feels good, or people doing art together because there's a feeling of community, or some kind of a shift for me being with the physicality of paint and mixing it and the meditative feeling for it. I guess I find some refuge in that. And
So
talking,
one thing, sorry, go on.
philosophy with people like you. Yeah.
So one of the things I really want to ask you to share with people, because, well, and I should maybe I'll add this into the introduction. But I met you because I came to Barcelona to study at Barcelona Academy of Art, and there were some extraordinary teachers in this school. You principal among them, and I'm very excited at your new venture in the world, which is the Realist Painter, which you set up with Kostas Protopapas. And I think everyone should know about it because it's phenomenal. I've already recommended it to several friends, many of whom have said they absolutely loved it. Can you tell us what it is and when the next one is happening?
It's a joint venture of basically, I guess because me and Costas are both nerds and we both have this drive to understand, to demystify what it is that we do.
Yeah.
Because I think we both have a deep belief that things need to be logical, and once people understand how things work, they can do them. So I think we both believe that talent for art is not something. We actually think that talent is how fast you can learn something. And our mission is to demystify this process, make it logical, make it clear, make it step by step, and going around the world, going on holidays and teaching it. And we've had really, really good results. I mean, in a weekend workshop of 3 days, people getting really good results. And I guess for us, the value in it is, first of all, being somewhere new or interesting, being with other people that are passionate about this.
That's huge.
And I would say for me, probably the best reward from that is just seeing people get excited about understanding how these tools work and being able to use them, and all of it making complete sense. So yeah, it's been very rewarding, a lot of fun as well.
And so you've got an amazing workshop coming up, the Bugaro one of my favorite artists. I mean, just absolutely outrageously good painter. Actually, one of my favorite paintings of his is in the Musée d'Orsay, and it's is it Equal Before Death? It's like the angel of death swooping
the
over
horizontal one.
It's astounding. Anyway, so yes, the workshop coming up in September, and this episode will come out before then. So if people want to find out more, I'll obviously include the links in the show notes. Where should they go to find out more about that and about you and your work?
They can go to our website, therealistpainter.com, go into the workshop section, and all of the details about the workshop will be in there. We're doing this in collaboration with Scott Waddell, who I think you know is kind of one of the rock star artists. We're so excited to be working with him. I mean, Bugaro is fantastic. He became very, very unfashionable, and it's crazy how little information there is about him just because he became the enemy of modern art, of good art. But still, I would say that he's probably one of, technically,
Yeah.
the stuff that he was able to do is just mind-blowing.
It's mind-boggling. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
So we're doing
And
this
then also
workshop
your
because we're
work.
trying to pull that apart so that we can see, like, how can we bring the things that we know, how can we bring that to bear on Bouguereau to try and demystify that process a little bit.
Amazing. And if people want to have a look at your paintings, I have got 2 of your paintings in my house, and they are beautiful, and people always comment on them. Where can people see your beautiful work?
On my website, carldejager.com.
Yeah.
I haven't been painting a lot recently. I guess I've been spending too much time with these workshops, but hopefully soon I'll be able to start work again.
I hope so. Carl, it's been such a pleasure. I'm looking forward to our next coffee together, and thank you for joining me on the show.
Always a pleasure, and thanks for inviting me, Natalie.